Welcome to Athletic Skills Podcast, the show where we help sports coaches and PE teachers learn how they can impact their athletes' movement and physical development in a fun, practical way. I'm your host, Isaac, founder of Athletic Skills, and in today's episode, we'll be chatting to Ashley Friel, who's an S&C coach from Australia. Ashley talks through his journey into S&C and his experiences moving to a new country. He talks through the importance of data collection in youth athletes, the similarities and differences between coaching in schools and sports clubs, and explains how he combines academic and physical data to impact his students' development. Don't forget to subscribe, and if you enjoy the show, leave us a review. And now let's get started. This podcast is brought to you by Brendan Chaplin Business Coaching. Brendan guides coaches and service-based entrepreneurs to deliver their best work, build a seven-figure lifestyle and performance business, and create a life of freedom. I started working with Brendan in September 2023, and it's been a great journey since I started working with him in launching my own business, Athletic Skills. Brendan has been fully invested in me and is a great person to chat with, to share ideas, and has vast knowledge and experiences to share also. The reason I picked to work with Brendan is that he has done it himself in launching businesses and has a similar background to myself in S&C and wants to live a life that you want. If you want to speak to Brendan on how he can help create a life of freedom and guide you on that journey, get in touch with him by one of the methods in the show notes and DM him the word coach, and he will start the conversation. You won't regret it, and there's a good chance it might just change your life too. Hi everyone, welcome to the Athletic Skills Podcast. I'm delighted to have Ashley Friel on board with me. So Ashley, thank you very much for joining all the way from Australia. I appreciate your time, and I know it's the evening for you, so I don't want to keep you too long, but thank you very much for coming to chat to us around youth S&C and your experience as an S&C coach.
No, pleasure, Isaac. Thanks for having me, and looking forward to chatting.
So Ashley, just want to share a bit about you and how you've become an S&C coach and your journey to where you are now.
Yeah, I guess I probably started quite late, really. Like I went to Northumberland in Newcastle and was doing sport and exercise nutrition, and just did that just on the back of just enjoying sport and PE, and probably how everyone else started those sort of degrees. And then didn't really know S&C was a thing until I was actually firmly probably into my second year of uni, when you do like a module and you go out and you get a placement. And then that's when I really started to take an interest and understand that there is a career there. So then, yes, did the third year, did my master's in S&C, and then continued to intern. So I was with Newcastle Falcons for a few years and interned, and just started to pick up bits and pieces off the back of there. So I was probably quite late getting into it, then go into uni and understanding that's the avenue I wanted to go down. And then, finished up with Newcastle and the various bits and pieces in the Northeast, and then didn't really have too much of a plan of where I wanted to go, what I wanted to do. Through your application, nothing, and then just took the plunge and got on a flight out to Australia, and with no plan really, and just worked my way through it over here, and been here for 5 years.
And you started picking up a bit of an Australian accent as well, would you say, since you've been over there?
I don't think so, but a few people start to say that.
So let's chat a bit around that. So I imagine a lot of people go out and maybe want to work in different countries, whether that's Australia, whether that's America. I know a few coaches have gone over that way as well. How did you find that change as you got over there into that unknown?
It was definitely an unknown. And then probably from just more, it was definitely more as a personal thing. Like you had to be pretty open and put yourself out there and make the connections and just be quite sure of yourself, but also sure of yourself, but come across like personal at the same time, that someone wants to take a chance with you and give you an opportunity. So those are probably the biggest like two learnings that I found. And then from there, it's just, if something comes your way, just be open to it. Say yes to every opportunity you get. Say yes to that coffee with that person, because you just don't know, a door might open for you and it could be the next opportunity for you. So that was the biggest thing for me, and that's probably what I would say to everyone, is come with an open mind and say yes to anything that comes your way, because you just don't know what could happen.
And it forces you to grow as a person, as a coach, and like you mentioned, networking. I think that's the most powerful thing to do as a coach in terms of building yourself and learning off different people. You run into an environment where you don't know anyone, it forces you to have a coffee with someone, or reach out to someone, or go down to a club to chat to someone, doesn't it?
Yeah, 100%. That's the way I think that's the way it is, and you've got to be open to that, and just got to put yourself out there, and you'll get knocked back like you do everywhere else, but there's some good out there, and when it comes, you've got to be ready for it. So yeah, you've got to just put yourself out there.
So now you're working in a school you mentioned before, so you've been working there for a little while, but you've also had experience in rugby. Just to chat around differences within sport and schools, so what differences would you say are in S&C or youth development within a sporting setting and a school setting?
I think there's probably more similarities than there are differences. Like I'll probably speak more firmly around like the age group that we work with, the youth, rather than say the elite level. But it seemed like both sides of the coin. Like when I was like from Newcastle, for example, in the UK, or any sort of club stuff over here, which has been like 18 to 20-year-olds, and then in the schools, there's probably more similarities than there are differences. Like everyone's going through a squat pattern, a hinge, a push, a pull, just how that's structured might be a little bit different. Obviously, I know you had the Rob Palmer on a while ago, and there's sort of differences in there where you might have some neck isometrics in there because of the nature of the sport. But yeah, I would argue that there's probably more similarities than there are differences. In the schools, for example, yeah, you might structure a session differently for a rugby environment than you would like a volleyball, and you might have a few little nuances in there, a little bit more representative of a volleyball game than say a rugby. But like I said, everyone's going through like just gross athletic motor development, nailing those fundamental movements, and it's just the nuances of like some prevention or bulletproofing, if you want to term it that might be the differences.
I don't know about in Australia where you are, but I think S&C in schools has grown massively over the last few years, and schools are starting to see the real benefits of S&C for not just performance, but also general physical activity. So would you say that trend is happening over where you are as well?
Yeah, 100%. That was certainly a big eye opener for me. Like the schools over here and how much they invest, not just in like the S&C, but their sport programs as a whole. So yeah, like from my example, like my school, we deliver S&C from year 7 through to year 12, which is UK kind of year 7 through to year 13. So the years are different. We deliver sessions for all the year groups across a multitude of sports when they get into the senior years. But for the boys who are in year 7 and year 8, they get kind of 2 S&C sessions a week as part of their games or PE curriculum. And that's alongside any additional PE work that they have. So there's a bit more of a gross exposure, like which compounds over time. And that's just like where the schools are going. It's a bit of a trend that quite a few schools are going along.
Yeah, and I've seen that a lot around the combining within PE, so that maybe it's a module or whether it's additional within a session that people are doing S&C within PE and using that as a facilitator to deliver and get time with their students.
Yeah, 100%. Like exactly right. Like it's an opportunity to deliver a session. It's an opportunity for a boy to experience being in a gym environment, to develop some sort of skill or competency. And then that just adds to that could just be there one session a week, but that one session a week could either then develop into 2 if they opt and choose to come to any of the additional school stuff. So when you just stack on the layers like time over time, by the time they leave year 12, which is a 6-year process, like they've developed exponentially since they're in year 7. It's all just about adding the layers, really.
So I spoke a bit about, I've had a few youth school S&Cs on previously, and they've chatted a bit around performance and general population sort of delivery. Do you have that sort of transition within your school, so where you deliver a performance pathway and then also a general physical activity pathway as well within your school?
Yeah, we would. So we keep like years. We probably like the LTAD model. We use that like the Bailey and Hamilton one. So we stage the years. To look at any of the boys from like probably year 7 to year 10 is through a development stage, and then just split into different stages. And then the guys who are say year 11, year 12 will probably look a bit more performance, and that's when there starts to be a little bit more influence from external, probably academies or organizations, a bit more focused on their performance. So it's just pretty much gross athletic development through year 7 through to year 10. And then that back end of school is a bit more like the performance end.
So previously we chatted around what you're interested in or passionate about, and we mentioned about data and how you use data to support your coaching and also to feedback to your athletes and how they may develop as a student, or if they're in that performance setting. Just want to chat a bit around your philosophy of collecting data for your athletes and why you want to go around collecting data as well.
I guess it's very easy to go down a rabbit hole. Like you've got so many different places you can grab the data from. You've got all this technology out there that can quantify and bring things to light, and you could easily get lost in it. We use it as kind of in a way to screen. So we do like growth screening from that year 7 through to year 10 twice a year. So boys are in like a summer and a winter sport. So we get access to all boys from year 7 through to year 10 that really have to go through the testing. And then, as boys go through the years, maturation takes place. So you'd ideally like to see like a nice positive trend across all physical metrics, and boys are better from when they start year 7 to where they are in year 10. That's the ideal sort of trend that we'd hope for, regardless of any sort of training input. But at the same time, we get this positive trend, but we use it to think that boys, because they play summer and winter, they have 2 sports to play. So we've got to keep the coaches of those sort of sports accountable for the development of the boys. You can't say, for example, have a boy who's a rower during summer who'll do no running based activity to then expect to back up and go and start playing potential first 15 rugby during the winter. It's almost kind of we put systems in place that we need to know that these are your students of where they're sitting. Okay, rowing, yes, you have boys there who do play rugby during the winter, but they need to start doing a little bit of speed throughout their rowing season. So we use it in that sense as well.
So you mentioned around the benefits of using that data and what it can show you in terms of planning your programs and also speaking to coaches and feeding out to your students. So what actually tests do you use, and does that change from year 7 to year 10, or is that the same test throughout the year?
So it's the same tests all the way through. So from year 7 through to year 10, like the test there, we get data points, snapshots for winter, summer sport for all the way through. So we're not changing the tests. We run like we run a yo-yo. We do a speed test where we get like a 0 to 10 speed, obviously 0 to 40, we get a flying 30 at the same time. And then just a kind of movement jump from a force plate. So we've got 3 key metrics there where we can go quite deep on them rather than having a broad spectrum of tests and just being able to have brief snapshots. I know previously the school used to do sit and reach tests like hand challenges on a pull-up bar and all these other different tests which didn't really tell them anything, where we've got 3 sort of key competency tests here which are quite translatable across all sports. So that's how we do, and then we just use the data from there to drive our decision making around the programming, and it allows us to be a little bit more proactive in decisions rather than we're testing on the back of something, so it all becomes quite a reactive decision. So that's where we're at with it.
And then I guess your reasoning for having 3 tests is just for having that, for collecting data, and you're actually going to use the data rather than testing for testing's sake. So I see a lot of coaches who have and I've been there before myself, having 10, 12 tests, and they might not use the data for anything. So having 3 tests there can really drive your and data analysis than what you're actually going to use it for. So that's why you're using just 3 tests.
Yeah, 100%. Like you said, like you don't want to be testing for the sake of testing or chasing numbers for the sake of it. Like he's got to be kind of purposeful and meaningful. But when you're doing it on such a large scale from year 7 through to year 10, which could have 150, 200 boys per year, it can't be too broad. You will just get lost in the scale of it. We've nailed 3 tests and then just reproducible over time.
So now you've got your data and you've collected it for the whole year group or for the whole school. What you're going to use, or how you're going to go about analyzing that data now?
So we can look at kind of trends through each year groups. You can go from year 7 to year 8, year 9, year 10 comparison, or then we can break it down per sport where you can go, okay, volleyball year 7, this is where you sit in an X test, or rowing in year 8, this is where you were for this. So we've got a few avenues we can begin to break it down and feedback to the coaches. But on a scale, we've got to remember that like we're in a school environment, so testing and feedback to performance related is going to get lost, especially with these years groups when they're in that developmental stage. What we're starting to do is using this sort of physical data and combine it with a bit of the academic data. And that kind of, as a schools, we always speak about like holistic development of the student. If we're combining like that academic and the physical, that really is encompassing the entire student across both sides of their school life. So we're looking at now, someone's got a low sort of physical output across these tests and they've got like a low academic output, then what is this individual's kind of niche? Are they music orientated? Are they drama focused, for example, or are they, if they've got like a high physical but a low academic, then what's their commitment outside of school? Here are they, I know, for example, like tennis over here, the boys have to go and leave and play in different tennis competitions to get points that can qualify. So some of them miss quite a lot of school. So are they suffering academically because they've got these such huge sporting commitments? And then if that's the case, then what our duty as a school to support the student in that? And is that really like an avenue that we're starting to push and use the data, because we feel that's going to be quite a lot more powerful for the boys, especially across those developmental years.
And I really like that. It's not something I've seen too often in terms of combining the academic and the physical data and the scores, and they get a report that shows them from both sides, and that might tell a bit more of a picture. Whereas if you look at something in isolation, you might be missing other factors that might be influencing that athlete or that student's development. Have you had, what's the students' like feedback in terms of that? Do they like to see both together and they enjoy and they go down that path?
It's not too much that like we put that sort of stuff out to the students. We keep it a bit isolated into that, like the academic and the sport and stuff, and then we go through like so obviously boys have tutors, which I imagine they do in the schools back home, that they might have drive conversations with tutors or their head of the house because they're in houses. So that's really where we're at, and then we'd only really intervene if there's actual a reason to intervene there. But when we look at it from that kind of side, it just paints a bigger picture of the student, and we can highlight and flag things that are a bit of a red flag to us, and then we can then go and have a conversation with someone, and then we can get on top of it before it might develop into a bigger problem. So we wouldn't really put that out to a student that you're low academic, low physical. We would keep that in-house and then have a conversation.
Have you got any nice case studies of where that might have impacted someone's development? So your physical data combined with the academic data, and then that's driven some sort of change within your delivery, or whether the school or anyone within the school's delivery. Has that happened previously?
There's been times where like someone could be new to the school, for example, like you get a new influx of year sevens who then, where he was like, it's a student was new to the school, but for whatever reason, he was out of sport. Like he didn't really have an aligned sport for a full year. So he missed out on that kind of integration into a certain sport, which will potentially may have impacted on his academic as well. So he was sitting in like low physical, low academic, and then was really struggling to settle. And so that's one that springs to mind. And like he was out of sport because he had surgery, and that was the reason why he was out. And then the whole things that come with sport, you build friends and teamwork and camaraderie and all that sort of stuff that he probably missed out on. And for that full year, and he was an overseas student, so it was already hard enough for him to settle. So that's one example that does come to mind, that where like this has been useful.
Have you got any tips or things to be aware of when you're collecting data? I mentioned a lot to coaches around the accuracy, the validity and the reliability of your data. When you see maybe an athlete's jumping 2 centimeters higher, or they've ran 0.2 seconds quicker, just to put your hat on that they're getting more powerful or they're being quicker. Have you got anything to be aware of when you're collecting your data, and how you're going to analyze that before you judge into conclusions?
Yeah, I think you have to be careful around the noise that you get from like the samples that you're using. We have to, certainly, I know for example, because we've done such like a large scale of data, so like such large data collection from like potentially up to 800 individuals across several tests, there will be some errors. Because there's going to be some human error in there from like recording things down, and so you have to be a little bit sensitive around there will be some kind of error. And I wouldn't just jump to, you've got to make sure there's a reason for, or there's a cause here that caused the change, or rather than just, like you said, like jump to a conclusion that this boy is now 0.5 of a second faster and he's flying 30. Was he actually? Did he? Or what was the environment? What was the environment? We have to test the flying 30 outside. Or was it a dry day? Was it a wet day? Did he have runners on? Did he have footy boots on? what are all these external factors that might cause that. And because we don't test like continuously, like every Monday morning, for example, you do a kind of movement jump where you're removing all that outside noise of things or variables where like, that could impact the test that could impact the test, that there's such like variation in what could happen. You've got to like just appreciate the environment that you're testing in, especially in a school where it's not a full-time environment so you don't have the luxury of like testing every Monday morning, whether straight after they've played on a Saturday. And then because we test twice a year, that obviously going through the growth, like a big gap between actually testing windows because they're growing. So what's the impact of maturation here as well? So yeah, that's what I would say. But yeah, like you mentioned, the validity, reliability of all your tests has got to be sound before you jump to conclusions, and then how you want to analyze your data on p-values or z-scores or distributions in cohorts. Then that's like the secondary thought after all of this.
And we mentioned a lot around objective data in this chat. Would you ever film your athletes during the testing? But I guess it'd be harder with a large cohort of athletes and students to film and actually analyze their movement in that way.
Yeah, pretty much just too difficult based on the sheer volume of students that you have testing. We do have the luxury of running 2 sort of speed sessions a week where smaller groups so that the speed coaches might film and feedback visually that someone's technique over this way, but on the testing it'd just be just too difficult.
And then we'll chat a little bit around, you mentioned around growth and maturation. Do you do any tests around measuring your athletes' growth or whether they're going through a growth spurt? Or do you monitor their maturation throughout their different year groups?
So we take this basic intros to look at Olympic and peak height velocity sort of stuff. Yeah, we just take the typical like seated height, standard height, weight, and age, and look at some sort of PHV stuff to get an indicator of where if they're pre or post sort of their peak height velocity. But yeah, we limit that just kind of year 7 and year 8, just due to sheer volume of numbers.
And again, I guess that'll change your programming and it'll influence coaches, what they're things to be aware of, and then also their academic stuff as well. If they're going through a growth spurt or you're seeing around that sort of phase, that you'll be things to be aware of for other coaches, won't there?
Yeah, mate, yeah, 100%. Like you all the time, especially around when there's little things going on and they're hitting that growth spurt, or you see the discrepancies between someone who's in year 7 and it could be tiny, you've got someone who's shot up out of nowhere, and there's all those sort of different things to consider. Yeah, again, we did collect all that data as just a bit of a guide around the PHB, and then when boys start to report things that needs a saw or for whatever reason, then we can always look back and be like, oh, actually you were X amount of time away from PHB, like blah blah blah. So yeah, again, just a guide.
And then to finish up on, have you got any tips or advice for any sports coach or PE teachers maybe wanting to test their athletes and collect some data for their youth athletes, and then how they may use it in their coaching or their teaching?
I would think of like why, understand what's the purpose of you testing, and then why do you want to do it, and then how is that going to help you? Those are probably the 3 pillars that you'd look at first, like how. And then once you've answered those, and like I mentioned earlier, pick 2 or 3 tests that you think is going to have the most like bang for your buck. Essentially, you can go in depth into if you need to. They're going to be reproducible over time, and then if you've got a large cohort that you can easily deliver en masse as well, that's not going to take too much time. And then you've got to think like time is probably valuable in the school environment, so you can't spend weeks and weeks analyzing the data, because by the time you know it, the next testing cycle coming around. So probably that's how I would go, and then understand. And then once you answer those pillars, then once you get the kind of those 3 pillars set, then you develop a bit of like a testing battery, like you mentioned. Then just begin to roll it out, and then I would probably start with the youngest year.
No, I like that. And always start with the why, I think, and then how you're actually going to use it, what your endpoint is going to be using that data. And I was say to coaches, think about what's going to be practical for them, because the last thing you want is a big line of athletes behind someone jumping a broad jump and where people get bored and demotivated, and that's the last thing you want, because you want your sessions to be fun and engaging, and testing to be fun and engaging as well. Thank you very much, Ashley, for your time. Appreciate your evening, and hope you have a good rest of your day, and speak to you soon. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the Athletic Skills Podcast. I hope you enjoyed our discussion and found it helpful in learning more about impacting your youth athletes' movement and physical development. If you did enjoy this episode, please take a moment to give us a like, subscribe, and share to any other coaches or teachers that you think it may help. Also, if you have any feedback or topics that you'd like us to cover in future episodes, please feel free to reach out to us on social media or on the email in the description, and we'll be more than happy to try and tackle those challenges you are facing as a sports coach or a PE teacher. Thank you very much, guys, for listening. I look forward to speaking to you soon.